Hey guys, this is part 3 of a video series where we're learning everything about metabolism. You probably have a lot of questions ever since we started the program. If we're working together, if we're not, this is really helpful for you to understand why nutrition needs to be personalized to you and not to anybody else, and why cookie cutter programs sometimes are not ideal. Today's topic is about metabolic adaptation. What is metabolic adaptation? Metabolic adaptation is your body's ability to adjust and to adapt to specific circumstances and environments that you're putting it on. Here's the thing about the body. Body always likes to maintain a state of something called homeostasis, which it's a really fancy scientific word for balance. It likes to stay where it's comfortable at staying. What does that mean? That means your body's not really excited about either losing or gaining weight, because it likes to stay where it's comfortable and when everything is happy. Now, when you put your body under different kinds of stresses, whether it's weight loss or weight gain, it's always going to resist that change. And it's going to try to adapt to overcome whatever stress that you're putting it under. Today we're going to learn how sometimes eating too little is not going to give you the results that you want to achieve. And here's why. We talked in previous videos about basically your resting metabolic rate, the amount of calories your body needs just to thrive and to survive in a resting state. And we talked about that there's other factors that come into play that we sometimes don't consider, such as the amount of calories your body needs when it's digesting food, when it is exercising, and when you're just moving around, not necessarily exercising voluntarily. Now, what happens is if the amount of calories that you're consuming on a daily basis is below that, technically speaking, you should be losing weight, right? But what if you've been doing this and you've been tracking this and you know for a fact that you're not just losing weight? Here's what happens. When your caloric levels, and this is what I call underfueling, because we talk about food as fuel. When you're underfueling and that caloric deficit that you're accomplishing or you're trying to reach is so low, which happens to a lot of people, because if you think about it, when you go into, for example, weight loss, you get into this mindset that I need to eat less and I need to work out more, right? So you're reducing the amount of fuel and energy that you're bringing into your body, and then you're increasing the amount of energy you're trying to get your body to burn, to do more of. So if you think about it, sometimes that can be putting the body into a lot of stress. And we want to avoid that at all costs because it's going to resist change. And I'll put this on here. Now let's go more into the scientific, into the specifics of this as to why this happens. I'm actually going to quote a really interesting study that they did a long time ago there's a show you probably may have heard of, which is The Biggest Loser Competition. So what these people actually go through is essentially they go to this competition. It's about, I think, 2 to 3 months or so. These are people that are morbidly obese, 300 to 400 pounds or so, sometimes more, and they compete to see who can lose the most amount of weight in a specific period of time. They go through this camp, they do workout 3 to 4 times or 3 to 4 hours on a daily basis, eating very little calories. Hear me out, almost 1,000 calories for these people. And of course, they do massively. They change your body completely. They have these amazing transformations and they lose all that weight. So it makes sense because we talked about caloric deficits, right? But here's what happened. There's a group of people that studied this, a group of individuals, I think from the season, I don't know if it was 2009, and they look at them 5 years later to see what they were at. And guess what happened? So most of them lost in somewhere anywhere between 100 to 200, even 250 pounds in the period of 3 to 5 months or so. But what happened now is actually incredible because they all, if not all of them, gained all the way back and sometimes more. So how can you explain that? Here's why. Metabolism is a very complex and intricate series of pathways and reactions that are happening in your body, like I said, to overcome change. One of the things that happens, for example, is you reduce the amount of calories your body needs in a resting state. We call that RMR, or resting metabolic rate. When you reduce your calories chronically, way too little, what happens is your body tries to find a new baseline. Essentially, it goes from here to 1,500 calories, remember in that video that we saw, and it brings it down to now, let's say, 1,000 calories. So that is your new base. That's number one. That's something that happens. Number two, you have a decrease in leptin levels. Leptin is a hormone that controls when you're hungry and when you're not. When you have a very huge decrease of leptin levels, your body sometimes may become resistant to that, and it doesn't really allow you to feel hungry because, again, you're just creating a new baseline, and that may not be ideal. When people are morbidly obese and they have way too much weight, specifically fat, sometimes those levels of hormones are exponentially high. We want to make sure that they're somewhere in the middle, not in extremes. So that is another thing that happens. At the same time, as you start to see decrease in thyroid hormones, thyroid is that one specific gland that controls your metabolism. It's in most of its entirety. And sometimes when you start to reduce and downregulate a lot of those hormones in thyroid, your metabolism also takes a hit. Again, making you now resistant to change, because that's just exactly your kind of weight, and your body goes into kind of like defense mechanisms, and it says, you know what, we need to hang on to what we have at this point. And last one, we do have an increase in stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and all of these different hormones that are usually part of your entire body's metabolism. They're a little out of range, not necessarily out of range, but sometimes they take enough of a big hit because, again, they're trying to overcome that stress that you're putting it under. So all in all, what you're doing is essentially affecting your body at a hormonal level that is creating a new different state for you, in which sometimes when you go above, that's when you have those rebound effect. And if you've ever dieted before, think about what happened. You did it for a while. That was probably a massive caloric deficit. If you went through one of those like juice detoxes, or one of those like very low calorie, very low carb, very low fat, very low everything diet, and you saw the change and you saw the results, but ever since you stopped that, things got out of hand, and then you went back up to the same way you were at, or sometimes even higher. And that's what happens a lot of times when we do yo-yo dieting, and the fact that that's obviously kind of putting your body into so much stress that it doesn't even know what to do anymore. So that's why sometimes reducing your calories and increasing the amount of exercising that you're doing, you're putting way too much stress in your body, and at the same time causing that resistance to change. Now, what if we change that narrative and say, what if we start fueling our body the right way, again, proper fuel, and start creating a good environment in your body for it to change? So when we start doing this, now your body's happy. Your body is in a state where it's balanced. And now sometimes when you create a smaller caloric deficit, and you do this in a smart way, paying attention to your macronutrients, focusing on quality of nutrition, focusing on your sleep, and we'll talk about that, all this information as we go through, then that changes the ball game, because now you have a body that wants, or that is essentially more prone to change when you put it into specific, not extreme conditions and situations. Now, here's the part that we're going to teach you why sometimes if you were starting at the very low caloric levels, and we talked about this in either your sessions, or we talked about this on Instagram, on any of this kind of states, then we need to understand why sometimes we need to increase your calories, and that may be frightening, but it's a way for us to do it. And how do we do that? We're gonna do that through something called reverse dieting, and we're going to talk about this in just a second. I'm going to write a few different things on the board, and then we're going to get going.